This time it's 5 British military motorcycles. The British military has always been a major user of motorcycles. You may see videos of German BMWs and Zundaps stampeding across Russia, but in reality Germany used very few motorcycles in its armed forces. The British, however, used more motorcycles than any of the armies per head. So here are 5 classic British military motorcycles from across the 2 world wars. The Kleiner 744 V-twin. Solid and well engineered, the Kleiner V-twin had reached the peak of its development at the dawn of World War I. Its qualities were not lost on the military, however, who adopted the machine as the main standard issue machine gun carriage. The machines were fitted with a sidecar and equipped with a heavy-duty Vickers 303 machine gun. The machines operated in threes to provide a highly mobile and very powerful attacking force. Based in Northamptonshire, Kleiner had begun motorcycle production in 1908. Early machines used proprietary engines provided by the Stevens Company of Wolverhampton, who would of course later found AGS motorcycles. And as AGS ramped up production of their own motorcycles, they found they no longer wanted to produce their proprietary V-twins. So when AGS moved into a larger production facility, Kleiner moved into the old facility and took over the machine tools and machinery for the V-twin engine. And so from 1910, Kleiner were producing their own motors, although for a while some early castings still carried the Stevens name. By 1911 it was all chain drive and 2 or even 4-speed transmission. The 1914 military version featured quickly detachable wheels, a 4-speed gearbox, and was of 744cc and a 55 mph top speed. Smart and robust, these machines were ideal for the Western Front. The Matchless G3L. Telescopic forks were still quite a rarity in the 1940s. They'd been pioneered by Scott in undamped form in the years before the First World War. However, in damped form they were first used by BMW in their competition machines, although Nimbus were actually the first to use them on a production road bike. But the Matchless 3GL was the first British machine to be fitted with hydraulically damped telescopic forks. At the start of the war the machine had been fitted with standard girder forks, but in 1941 the machine adopted the telehydraulic telescopic fork, instantly doubling the amount of movement available from 3 inches to 6 inches, greatly improving both rider comfort and the machine's ability off-road. This made it one of the most desirable of all the British dispatch rider machines of the Second World War, and the fact the machine ran overhead valves rather than side valves like the BSA M20 made it even more desirable. The engine was based on AMC's sporting overhead valve unit, was of 348cc and had a bore and stroke of 69 by 93 mm. Compression ratio was 5.9 to 1 and there was a 7/8 inch AML carburetor fitted. The engine produced a claimed 16 horsepower at 5,600 rpm and with a dry weight of 345 pounds or 155 kilos, the machine was capable of around 65 miles an hour. The machine was not without its faults, and these would hamper its uptake with the military. The brakes front and rear were quite small given the performance, and the dynamo wasn't particularly reliable, but overall it was one of Britain's more capable military mounts. The BSA M20. At the dawn of the Second World War, BSA was Britain's largest motorcycle company, but by 1935 the company was gearing up to produce vast quantities of firearms and munitions for the anticipated war ahead. The M20 was first launched in 1937 as a touring machine primarily aimed at the sidecar market. Early development models of the machine had been submitted for military trials in 1935 and 1936 but had not been passed as satisfactory. But after making the required modifications, the machine would be passed in 1937, although it must be said only just. And following this a small batch was purchased in 1938. The machine used a single-cylinder, air-cooled side-valve 4-stroke unit of 469cc with a bore and stroke of 82 by 94. Compression ratio was a very low 4.9 to 1 and peak power was just 13 horsepower at 4,200 rpm. Top speed was around 60 miles an hour, on a good day that is. Initially home office orders were fairly slow, But after the loss of Triumph's factory, along with its advanced parallel twin overhead valve 350, the Home Office decided to concentrate their orders on well-proven machines that were already in service, and so simple, flexible and above all robust machines like the Norton 16H and the BSA M20 would be ordered in large quantities, with the M20 eventually going on to be the most numerous military motorcycle of World War II, with over 125,000 of the machines eventually seeing service. Post-war, huge numbers of the machines were discharged from the military service of Great Britain, were usually repainted black and were snapped up by a British public eager for personal transport, with most being fitted with sidecars and being the main family transport for the advent of cheap cars in the mid to late 50s, although some would remain in military service for smaller countries, with the last machines finally being discharged in 1971. The Norton 16HW. The Norton 16HW has a lineage that stretches all the way back to 1911 and was in its day a successful TT machine. The engine was 490cc with a bore and stroke of 79 by 100, with the nominal horsepower of the time being listed at 3.5, although it was nearer 12 in reality. And in its early belt drive, single speed form was capable of top speeds in excess of 80 miles an hour. By 1919, the machine, now listed as Model 16, featured all-chain drive and a 3-speed gearbox, and the company would continue to campaign the machine at the TT through until 1922 and the introduction of the overhead valve engine. Also in the early 20s, Norton would introduce the Kleiner model. This was aimed at the expanding market in less well-developed areas of the empire, where of course roads were unpaved, so superior ground clearance was desirable. A home market variant of this machine was developed and called the 16H, H of course meaning home. And this machine would prove a popular touring model of the late 20s and early 30s, and with its comparatively high ground clearance, it would also find favour in trials competition also. By the beginning of the 30s, the machine had of course gained a saddle tank and had a reworked engine providing more power, and the British Army, taking note of the machine's use in off-road competition, began to place regular orders for an off-road version of the machine from 1936 onwards. And indeed the machine would prove a popular dispatch rider's mount, with more than 80,000 of the military variants being delivered in total. And while production ended in 1955, some would remain in military service through into the late 50s. The Triumph 3SW. The 3SW can be seen as one of the last Triumph side valve singles for which they'd been so famous in the years before World War II. And these particular machines were designed by Val Page and first entered the range in the mid-30s as the 3-1. The engine was of 349cc and had a bore and stroke of 70 by 89mm, and in its original form featured enclosed valve gear, an aluminium head and hand gear change. However, in the late 30s, Edward Turner would arrive and restyle the bikes, giving them a bit more pizzazz, giving them a chrome fuel tank and converting the gear change to a foot change. Turner would rechristen the bike the 3S, and this would form the basis of the military 3SW. And in 1937 the bike would take part in the military trials and would win contracts thereafter. In military form the bike would drop the aluminium head and replace it with a more simple and above all cheaper iron unit. The machine's modest performance however remained unchanged at 12 horsepower at 4,800 RPM. And so when war broke out in 1939, Triumph were already dispatching large numbers of the 3S 350 and 5S 550 to the British Armed Forces. But Triumph however had more ambitious plans. There was the 350cc parallel twin 3TW. This machine was designed to meet the specification for a bike weighing less than 250 pounds. Although once aluminium became unavailable, the weight did creep up to 260 pounds. However, on the 14th of November 1940, the German Luftwaffe with 400 aircraft raided Coventry, completely destroying the Triumph factory at Priory Street, taking with it the first batch of 50 3TWs. It was quickly realised that the Priory Street works was beyond repair, so a small industrial unit was found in rural Warwickshire where production of the 3SW was able to continue. But by 1941 the company was re-establishing itself at the Meriden work, and on the 31st of October 1941 Triumph produced their last 3SW, with the model now being replaced by the overhead valve 3HW, which would continue in production until the end of World War II. and would even be produced for a short time post-war, making it the only large capacity single to be produced by Triumph at the Meriden Works. What other bikes or collections of bikes would you like to see us cover in a future video? Perhaps you've got a bike we can use for a test ride. Either way, get in touch below. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, thank you very much for watching.